Hello, good evening, and welcome to the program. You're watching Sunday Politics on Trust TV. Thank you most kindly for joining us on what promises to be yet another engaging edition of the program where we discuss politics, policy, and other developing issues within and outside the country. My name is Abdullahi Ahmed. Well, this past week, the federal government says it is set to roll out palliatives worth 4.3 trillion naira to cushion the effect of fuel subsidy removal under the current administration. Parts of the palliatives have been payments of cash to no fewer than 18.7 million vulnerable households and the acquisition of CNG-powered buses amid the rising spate of inflation. It also includes agricultural interventions and financial aids to manufacturers as well as small and medium-scale enterprises across the country. Now, this was just as the presidency says the series of palliatives were informed by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's determination to provide succor to Nigerians amid the consistent wave of economic hardship and inflation. So, is this the all too familiar and ineffective practice going to be the silver bullet that slays the monster of food inflation, poverty, and a general sense of despondency in the most populous black nation in the world? Is the Nigerian federal government doing the same thing while expecting a different result? Well, let's get the conversation started with a recap of the story that broke this past week with regards to that announcement and what it represents as far as the Tinubu administration's solution towards the current economic climate is concerned. Here's State House correspondent Kende Amodu with that story.
Now more than ever before, the country needs to boost agricultural productivity and strengthen the economy. The president believes this can happen by creating opportunities in the real sectors of agriculture, manufacturing and construction, as well as provide urgent economic relief for Nigerians. Under the program, the Sokoto-Badagry Highway has been prioritized, as have other road infrastructure projects such as the Lagos-Calabar Coastal Highway, which is underway, and the Trans-Saharan Highway. The Sokoto-Badagry Road project is a point of focus because it covers 216 agricultural communities, 58 large and medium dams spread across 6 states, and over 1 million hectares of arable land. The president has also approved full counterpart financing for the Port Harcourt-Maiduguri Railway, as well as the Ibadan-Abuja segment of the Lagos-Kano Standard Gauge Railway. Other components of the program are the one-off allocation to states and the Federal Capital Territory of 10 billion naira for the procurement of buses and CNG uplift program, and the delivery of 50,000 uplift grant each to 100,000 families per state for 3 months.
The National Economic Council was told of the progress that has been made with the updating and improving of the social register, which of course is the register used to send direct payments to beneficiaries through who have a NIN and have a BVN and can receive funds digitally into their accounts in a transparent manner. That process has been strengthened and it now needs speeding and scaling up given the situation in the country as far as inflation and elevated prices.
The program is also making provisions for labor unions and civil society organizations, while it is releasing 155 billion naira for the purchase and sale of assorted foodstuff to be distributed across the nation.
As Honorable Minister of Agriculture and Food Security, I also briefed Council on the interventions on the 42,000 metric tons, of which all had been delivered to all the states, and then 20 trailers of rice per state. And then we have also released over 1,500,000 bags of fertilizer, which is under evacuation by the state governments.
The states are important drivers of the program, which is why President Tinubu is assuring governors that he is willing to provide the needed support to ensure that all Nigerians are relieved of hardship. The key is for the state to deliver on the critical reforms required to meet the needs of the people.
The question is that going to be enough to get us out of this quagmire? Let's bring in our panelists now. Join us on the program is the immediate past National Coordinator of the NSIP, that's the National Social Investment Program, also a former Secretary to the State Government in Adamawa State. Dr. Umar Bindir is here with us this evening. Join us virtually is Emmanuel Osemeka, who is a Public Affairs Analyst, who will be joining us via Zoom this evening. Good evening to you, Mr. Osemeka. Thank you so much for joining us on the program. Doctor, good evening. Thank you so much for stopping by tonight. Let's start this way. Is this going to be enough?
Well, it's a good effort, but palliatives are never enough because they are palliatives. They are supposed to cushion an immediate intervention, hoping that other initiatives will now sprout and be sustained to now pick the people, to float. So I think the government is trying, especially with the prevailing difficulties in terms of resources, in terms of logistics, and so on and so forth. So, palliatives are never enough. And we know technically that palliatives are not sustainable. And that is why they are not enough. But palliatives are necessary to ensure that we give an immediate shock treatment. But you have to work very hard. The state governments must work very hard to ensure that, particularly for farming, it is farming season now. People go back to the farms. It's safe to go and farm. Inputs are readily available. Extension work is very sharp, and so on and so forth.
You look at the scale of the problem, Mr. Osemeka, let's bring you into the conversation. The federal government is saying 10 billion naira to each of the 36 states of the federation, including the FCT, to address the transportation question with the supply of those CNG buses. 42,000 metric tons, according to the Minister of Agriculture and Food Security, have been delivered to the various states for onward distribution. Over 1 million bags of fertilizer to augment the usual intervention that farmers are supposed to get. When you look at the scale of the problem versus the scale of the solution, what are your thoughts about what the federal government is trying to achieve with this expenditure of close to 5 trillion naira?
Okay, thank you very much for having me. So, like I usually say, one, the interventions are coming in pretty late, but it's better late than never. However, I believe that the government ought to have been more proactive. We're already in rainy season. All these interventions should have happened sometime in January or late last year so that the farmers can properly prepare adequately. You know bureaucratic it is, with the state government. Now you're getting interventions from the federal government through the state government to the beneficiaries. So the first question is, what are the mechanisms that have been put in place to ensure that as soon as these interventions, hit the state, it will immediately get to the beneficiaries, either the farmers for planting, to aid the planting season that we are in. In the next 2 months, we should be in August, and August is supposed to be the harvest season. With that, it is expected that if government had done this much earlier, we will first of all begin to mitigate the issue of the high cost of foodstuff in the country. And with that, if it's done properly, it will aid the reduction in the galloping food inflation that we already have in the system. But when you talk about the palliative, I believe, honestly, that palliative is not the way to go. But it is important to have some strategic, support system to help the most vulnerable in the society, to help especially those who are at the lower income strata within our society. The minimum wage is still a big debacle out there. So no matter the level of palliative you give, it will go back into the system and continue to increase the misery that the average Nigerian worker or the average Nigerian families are facing today. So I believe 100% that yes, the palliatives are good, but they are just a drop in the ocean so far.
Right. And Doctor, let's talk about the safety net, which Osemeka has pointed out. I mean, even advanced economies do have some of these safety nets to help people at the bottom of the pyramid. The Minister of Finance and the Coordinating Minister of the Economy, Wale Edun, there was talking about how they were using the social register, something you're quite familiar with. Give me a sense of what the Tinubu administration needs to do, not only differently, but effectively, because we keep missing the target when it comes to these palliatives. I mean, from last year, since the removal of fuel subsidies, so many announcements were made. A lot of funds were supposedly disbursed to even some of these states. We're well aware of all those monies that were sent to the states so that they can, at their own subnational level, address some of these gaps there. Give me a sense of why throwing money at the problem doesn't seem to solve the problem.
Well, literally, the first thing is that the problem is very big. Number one, 10 billion naira per state. Some states have got 44 local government areas. Other states have got only 6. So is it a flat? If it's flat, it means the states that are big, large population states, large local government states, large administration
so there is
states.
it doesn't make sense for Lagos and, say, Yobe State to share the same amount of money?
Well, I mean, this is natural. They have more people, they have more complex structures, therefore the logistics will be very heavy. And so that means there must be another technical support to states to get more organized so that they can be able to deliver. Secondly, the social register, as I knew it, was specifically for cash transfer, right? And the social register was again specifically household based, not individuals. The individuals under the social household register is the caregivers. So a house with a lot of people has somebody who is representing them. So social register is actually for the representatives. So again, that is for cash transfer. Certainly, the other efforts must be deployed to help the states logistically to share eyes. I mean, you saw how difficult it was for, say, for example, the governor of Katsina State when palliatives were being shared in some stadium or football field or whatever. You know, he has to be there. He was sweating and trying to ensure that people are queuing up and so on and so. When are you going to continue to do that? So states need further technical support, not just the material. 3, farming is only one sector. Everybody talks about farming because the cost of tomatoes are very high, onions are not readily available and so on there, and you can only produce those through farming. And like Emeka said, the timing in agriculture is very, very important. You know, from planting to harvesting is fixed. Therefore, release of inputs, release of financial resources to support farming must have an accompanying calendar to latched to the production cycle. So if fertilizer arrives to this farmer when he's supposed to harvest, then I mean he can only sell it and be able to get half the price or whatever. You know. So again, it's logistics. 5, you see, targeting is very, very important. As we see in most urban and suburban areas, it's young people who are unemployed is the big deal. You know, the social register doesn't capture them. You know, they are not farmers and they are very active and they have done their education, they've done their NYCs for those who are educated, for those who are not educated. So in the then NSIP, NPower had a wide range of projects to cater for this. There's ones for uneducated and primary school, there's ones for secondary school, there's one for university.
Which have been discontinued, right?
Yeah, and well, as we speak, maybe, like the Honorable Minister of Finance said, associated to the upgrading of the social register, possibly the NPower 2 has been rejigged, possibly the school feeding also has been rejigged, possibly the JIP also has been rejigged. He has not mentioned that, but I don't think taking just the social register relays the efforts that is being done.
And Osemeka, bringing you back into the conversation, for a country with well over 40% poverty level, surely 18.7 million vulnerable Nigerians as a target of the federal government is not going to be enough to make a huge difference, is it?
Absolutely not. I mean, so, many of us within the humanitarian sector have also questioned, the makeup of that social register, and of course, several other intervention register that is used by the government. Many have also attributed the fact that the makeup of most of those registers, is politically, induced, but we are yet to have a more holistic conversation or explanation, at best, to describe or to prove that surely that the correct mechanisms were used to target the specific most vulnerable within the specific location, and of course more so they had to reach locations within the country. I mean, a case in point is when we began in Borno State, Adamawa, and Yobe, when we started the emergency operation in 2015, 2016, we had issues of malnutrition. What we did was very simple. We simply declared war on malnutrition. We targeted the caregivers, the female-headed households, and also men-headed households, because we had quite a number of them at the time. And we targeted them with specific nutritious, supplements and food. And within 6 months, we were able to see very significant results. And after a year, we began to transition into livelihood because, yes, like the SSG mentioned, humanitarian or palliative packages are not sustainable. They are very expensive to keep as a government. But the federal government has, maintained palliative distribution for more than 10 years now. And I really don't understand if they are not thinking about transitioning, because the fact remains, whatever challenges we've had in different states or different localities, either banditry, insurgency, or what have you, these beneficiaries had a source of livelihood. The idea would be to look at what were these livelihoods they had before. What can we do to take them back to begin to eke a living for themselves? And that way, you free up a lot of these funds and create, channel for these beneficiaries to begin to get their lives back. And I believe that is the more sustainable thing to do. The state government, the federal government must work together to ensure that we do not sit, and every year we budget trillions of naira, and half of it will go into corruption, the other half will get to the beneficiaries, while of course those who distribute it will take a larger chunk of it at the end of the day. So I believe it's time that we think out of the box. Government needs to be faster than they are right now. They are moving at snail speed. The issues at hand require speed, require haste, require strategic thinking, strategic implementation, and with clear-cut evidence when it is finally, delivered.
And Doctor, in talking about this all too familiar problem, we've been here several times over the past 10 years. And it's very clear that while palliatives are welcome, especially by people who are in dire need of those interventions, it is not only not sustainable, but it doesn't last long. It's as the same adage goes. Teach someone to catch a fish, you feed him for a lifetime, but if give him fish today, you only feed him for a day. So why do we keep doing the same thing, expecting a different result? I mean, this was the same situation at the NEC meeting last year after the announcement of the removal of fuel subsidy. They did this, didn't work much. Inflation is up by over 33% and rising. How realistic are the government's expectations about what this intervention will likely do as far as bringing relief is concerned?
Well, they teach someone how to fish and then he will eat fish for the rest of his life only applies in China. In Nigeria, if you teach somebody how to fish, he will teach another person how to fish. And then the chain just goes on, and then there is no fisherman. You know what I mean? So, to me, the federal government supplementing or supporting state governments must have a structure for measurement. You remember, the social register was challenged by state governments. So it would be nice to see that every register in a state is signed by a governor to say that I am now happy with this register. Then everybody knows that the total register, no governor can come and say we don't trust this, so that we don't go back to that. 2, there must be some kind of bait. Each state government must develop very solid database or databases of all these interventions. If you are giving microcredit, every state should provide the list of the women, the trades, their locations, local government.
You're saying over the years there's not been impact assessment on
of course.
All of these interventions by the subnational?
The thing is, I mean, every time that we come back to the drawing board, you will find that it is the state government that are complaining. Federal government will say, look at the quantum, the program that we have designed, the quantum of resources we've released. The problem is always the state government will either complain that it has not reached. You remember even the palliatives. State governments were complaining that they had never saw anything until young people started smashing stores to drag all the indomies and so on and so forth. Then everybody saw that they actually received it. So there must be very, very clear and transparent operation to demonstrate that states are active. So if you are receiving 10 billion naira, what is this 10 billion naira for?
I say it's for CNG buses.
Yes, therefore, CNG buses is to transport people from one point to the other. So the whole mapping of the transport system, the state has to do it. You cannot just have all the buses bought and they are all in the state capital. In Adamawa, you have 21 local government areas. Are you going to put 2 buses per local government? Are these buses going to take farmers to farms or just school children to schools?
Do you think there is no, are you alluding to whether there is or an available framework to guide the implementation of this?
I think, as far as I am concerned, I think this federal government is trying, but there's a gap of either the technical or logistical support that is required for state to spark. Otherwise, money goes like that. Yes, money, anybody can give money and anybody can spend money. But our target is to reduce this vulnerability, reduce this poverty, ensure that by the time monitoring agents come, there is a framework for them to say there is a person, it's a female, this is their telephone number, this is their bank account, this is where they're located. If you don't have such information developed by the states, so that they don't come back later to say that, oh, federal government gave us the money, they sent us the list of the beneficiaries, oh, we don't have anything to do with this. No, that integration is a technical thing, and it has to also be developed, not just the money and the bags of rice.
Right, and it appears that we do have quite the balancing act that the federal and subnational governments need to do to address this one. But the elephant in the conversation, for the most part, is the fact that we still have a lingering stalemate over the whole minimum wage issue that has not yet been resolved. And one would expect that, for a government that is crying out loud about not having enough resources to address some of these concerns that Labour has about improved wages for workers in the country, it is planning to, disburse and spend close to 5 trillion naira in this regard. Do you think that at the end of the day, the government is backing itself into a corner, especially with this, conundrum of negotiating a minimum wage with organized labor?
You see, the level of indecisiveness at the level of the federal government, speaks volume. And it goes to speak to the fact that, it appears as if the drivers of the system called Nigeria today were not prepared, before coming into office. Or either they were prepared, but they were not well prepared enough for what they met when they came on board. However, whatever they may have seen, I believe they've been in office for 1 year, and 1 year is more than enough for you to raise a competent, brilliant team to begin to, chart a clear path to where you want to be. Whatever the challenges are, they are not insurmountable. Back in the days, we used to say, oh, this is not rocket science. Now, rocket science is the easiest, innovation. Today, private ventures, individuals are also getting into rocket science and going to the moon and back and going to Mars and all that. So the challenges bedeviling Nigeria is very simple. What we are seeing today speaks loud, speaks volume to the level of incompetence that is pervading various sectors of the Nigerian, economy today. From the president to the list of the ministers, they have shown gross incompetence. And it's very unfortunate that where we are today, what we ought to have done 6 months ago, we are beginning to do them. And what we are doing is that we are throwing monies at problems without clear roadmaps, without clear vision of what the challenges are and how to solve the challenges that we're talking about. I recall earlier in the discussion where we said, 10 billion to each state. How did we come about 10 billion? What is the yardstick for giving each state 10 billion? Bayelsa will get 10 billion, 8 local government, Kanu, 44 local government, 10 billion. How? What are the yardsticks? What is the number of vehicles, CNG versus they will put there and all that? How much are they also putting for the palliative? The fertilizer the 1 million fertilizer that is being distributed, what are the mechanisms for distribution? How are we, what is the level, what number of farmers do you have in Bayelsa, in Yobe versus Kanu and Yobe, Jigawa and the rest of them? So I believe that there's a lot of, incompetence going on in Nigeria of today, and they need to wake up. There's nothing difficult in negotiating a minimum wage. If it is 100,000 you can pay as minimum wage, bring labor into a room, sit down and explain it sincerely. Cut the luxury that you are throwing around at the National Assembly, at the executive level. Cut it, and cut it. That way, labor will listen and Nigerians will support you 100%. But you cannot tell labor 62,000 and you're living large. You want to buy a brand new presidential jet when you can take public transport as president. Other presidents of the world do it. If you do it, nothing will happen.
Right.
We don't see why National Assembly will get 160 million for one vehicle each, and you are telling labor 62,000. It doesn't make sense at all. They can solve this problem, but they are just completely incompetent.
Okay, that's a very critical take there from Osemeka. Doctor, bring you back into the conversation as someone who has had to implement this vision during the past administration, to some commendation as well as criticism. Can we afford it, especially in this current economic climate? I mean, given everything that the government is saying, just piggybacking off of Osemeka's last comment about the government saying we don't have enough money to afford, this amount of, wage as demanded by labor and so on and so forth. But now, apparently, I mean, this past week, the president just sent in, another request, asking for an extension of the implementation of the budget. I mean, we can talk about the whole budget cycle itself and all the chaos that it is causing. But in looking at our financial conundrum right now as a country, with everything that is happening to the economy, the slowdown and whatnot, can we afford close to 5 trillion to bring this palliative package into reality? I mean, because so many times they've said it, but the release of the monies don't eventually happen.
Abdullahi, let me digress and give you an example. Affordability, you see, every time in Nigeria we just have this, I think since Udoji's time, something has injected some challenges in thinking that finances is the final thing. Let me give you, like I said, let me digress. Take universities in this country. You have more than 260 fully conventional universities. Of that, maybe there are 70 to 80 federal government universities. Now, ask yourself, techniques for preparing your land, the seeds that you breed and produce, the fertilizer that you formulate, the equipment that you use on small scale to large scale farm, all these are outputs of knowledge. And they all come out from universities and research institutions. How come that even where we're using equipment and devices, and even seeds now, that we have to import all this, but we have 240 universities. Now, if you talk of salaries or wages, wages is an hourly income. Salaries is the monthly thing that we know. But the discussion has to be aligned to outputs. We never discuss this. We just think we pay people, they are working. I was a civil servant. I was overworked as a civil servant. I used to report very early at 7:30, 8 o'clock, leave at 10 o'clock or 10:30. Why? It's not fair on me, but others are not actually doing the work. I had the skills, I had the training, and therefore I had to do all of that very unfairly. Others will just come to the office, take their salary or wages, and then go home. These things have to be checked. So part of the discussion is outputs
many would say
and
that,
inputs.
You know, I mean, while that may be true about productivity of the civil service and whatnot, that perfectly captures what we're getting from our political class. We're not getting value for all the money that we're spending on their well-being.
Fine, then we have to discuss that too. So when you say that resources, I mean, ideally, if I give you a scenario, if you are to get your university, not just to be a school for teaching young people to get certificate. This university has to be a fantastic experimentation station. It must also sell its products, intellectual consultancy, products from its own research to make money before. It also has, but when you do all that, the kind of people that you will get out of that university will be young people who are very productive, very cultured and so on and so forth. But that is not happening.
Yeah, to the point exactly. I mean, our debt to GDP ratio just crossed the 50% threshold, right?
Yeah.
And you look at our balance sheet, it's not looking good. That's where the question comes in. Can we afford it?
Well, I'm not an economist, but certainly with the figures you are quoting, it's not affordable. Once you are not balancing, it's not going to work. But naturally, palliatives are like that. They are very, very expensive. You must be able to be very, very strategic in your palliative. If I'm giving people, for example, when we did the COVID, all the keke napep people have parked their keke because we've closed the markets. We're under lockdown. And then when we came, there was a palliative shock treatment to all of them. Meaning that if you give them money, 5,000 every month, for 6 months, it's open now. Their kekes will now virtually revive. And before you know, all of them are back on their keke napep. That's how palliatives work. But if you think you are just sitting like this, carry palliative and eat the rice, you will sit like this again. So the palliative has to be joined as an immediate solution to short-term output standards that will lead you to medium-term output standards that will lead you to long-term. So these are technical things. Like Mike said, you have to prepare the whole thing. What we're showing Nigerians is just money, 10 billion, palliative bags of rice, bag of fertilizer. But a lot of activities to capture all that to make it work must also be discussed. Unfortunately, that is highly technical, that requires capacity, that requires organization. The logistics have to be very, very systematic and so on, which I'm sorry to say that in most cases in our country, we do not take those things as serious. Even people like us that take it very, very serious, you say, oh, no, these people, these Boko people, these grammar people, and so on and so forth. And then you condemn logical preparations under the Oibo, whatever thing.
Right. It's safe to say that it is more than just a complicated situation. However, the approach has been the same, throwing money at the problem to appease Nigerians, to pacify Nigerians, or at least to say that succor is on its way. For the most part, this is supposed to be a stopgap approach, but it has become part of an everyday approach from administration to administration. We're going to open the conversation to our viewers now. If you want to chime in and join the conversation, feel free to do so. We're waiting for your contribution. Rules of engagement. Please turn down the volume of your TV set, state your name, your location, and go right ahead with your contribution. Osemeka, let's further the conversation by looking at the cause and the effect. For the most part, if you speak to so many Nigerians, they say it started, or rather the situation became complicated on Inauguration Day when President Tinubu said subsidy is gone. And the issue around whether it is transportation, for instance, or power, or cost of living, generally speaking, with regards to food inflation and things like that, it will not get solved by putting money into people's pockets by way of grant whether it's household grant of 50,000 naira or giving them grains. It goes directly to the heart of the problem, which is the decaying infrastructure that we do have right now with our roads, with our power sector, and so on and so forth. What are your thoughts about whether this monies that the government is trying to inject as an intervention can actually solve the problem if it was channeled differently to address the root causes of why we are where we are today?
That's exactly what I was talking about when I said that whatever activity government intends to do, it must be holistic, it must be well thought out, it must be clear, it must be smart, like we would say in the civil society. It has to be strategic, it has to be measurable, it has to be accurate. Some will say it must be accountable, some will say it has to be realistic, and you must look at the threats, that will, challenge the implementation or that will affect the implementation. That way you sit down and create a proper implementation plan from beginning to the end. So what it means is that before you even deploy, you must have had a clear bird's eye view of where you're going. You're going 10,000 miles, you start with a step. From step 1 to step 10,000, you must have a clear bird's eye view of where and what you're going to do. So it's not just enough to throw in 5 trillion. We're just throwing money. So the government came on board. In my view, what happened is that, yes, Buhari's administration made a complete mess, but it was recoverable. If the president was not, giving to populism, unnecessary populism, the Buhari's administration deliberately kicked the can of fuel subsidy removal down the road. So they created a 6 months budget for fuel subsidy, whether it existed or it didn't exist. That's a different conversation for another day. Till June 30th, 2023.
Right.
May 29, when the current president took office, because of populism, he made announcement that fuel subsidy was gone without thinking of the effect of a pronouncement by a president. The words of the president are policy statements. Whatever the president says are policy. And he didn't understand that the ripple effect of that statement will affect the food, the transport,
Osemeka,
and
just
all
a
of
moment
it.
there.
In addition, the following week, he merged, floated the currency, and that's why we are here.
Bring in our first caller into the conversation so we can get a variety of views. Honorable Igboko is joining us from Abakaliki this evening. Honorable, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us on the program. Do we still have Honorable Igboko on the line?
Yes, you are. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us on Sunday Politics. Go right ahead with your thoughts.
Thank you very much.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much. I've been listening to the gentleman in the studio, and you are the first person.
Right.
I want to say that what we have in Nigeria today is the elite conspiracy against the people. The elites of Nigeria have ganged up against themselves to deal with the people. What we have today, what is palliative and what is the use of palliative? Palliative is a temporary measure that has no lasting effect on the life of the people whom you give palliative. Go into industries, go into agriculture, use this money, all these billions for palliative, use it and go back to agriculture. Procure fertilizer, procure seeds, and distribute to the people and give them the enabling environment to thrive.
Honorable. The government, the Minister of Agriculture and Food Security did state that over 1 million bags of fertilizer have been procured for distribution. Over 42,000 metric tons that they've announced a couple of months ago have also been distributed, and they're injecting some of these funds also to small and medium-scale enterprises to help them stay afloat. So is that not a step in the right direction, just to double down on your point?
For the past 1 year of this government, how many farmers have you seen that benefit from this thing we have just said now? I am a farmer. I live in Abakaliki. I farm. You understand? I have never seen one. So I want to say something. If the government declares state of emergency on agriculture, the government will also have to declare state of emergency on the bandits and the herdsmen that are killing people all over and preventing farmers from going to their farms. These are the basic things. You have to secure the people first before you start talking of palliative. The man you give palliative and is not secured, where will he stay and eat the food? So let us discuss issues that are fundamental to the existence of human beings in this country.
Right. Thank you so much, Honorable Iboko, for that.
Our priority should be security, agriculture, industry. Then we can get out of this quagmire.
All right.
God bless you. Thank you.
God bless you too, Honorable Iboko. Thank you so much for joining the conversation, Honorable Iboko. A take that is, all too important. Just signposting that gap that exists. As a farmer, he says he has not been able to access what apparently is supposed to be accessible, although not to all farmers, but to many farmers. And we can also debate the whole idea about whether 1 million or over 1 million bags of fertilizer is going to be enough to actually make a difference in the value chain across the country. Just double back to Emeka there so you can finish your line of thought. Osemeka, just before the call came in, and if you can just simply react to what Iboko had to say about what he thinks this intervention is likely going to do or not.
Yeah, so Mr. Iboko from Abakaliki is a classical example of the average Nigerian farmer who the government, the federal government, and of course the state government have consistently mounted that they've given or they are providing, palliatives, if we can use the word, for. Unfortunately, Mr. Iboko, as a farmer, has not even received any of those support. And yet we say we're declaring emergency. I remember when the Minister for Agriculture, made that statement. It's not enough. That's one of the problems I have with, bringing core politicians into, very serious sectors. I believe that if we had gotten, a seasoned technocrat, with the making of somebody like Umar Bindir. I'm not saying Umar Bindir, I'm saying somebody like him, who is a core technocrat in agri. I believe that it will be slightly different. The approach will be different. The planning will be different. It will not be about political legalese and all that. So Iboko is a shining example, and it reflects, what the farmer in Yobe, the farmer in Borno, the farmer in Adamawa, the farmer in Kano, in Jigawa and Kebbi is going through.
Okay. Let's go back to Abakaliki once again because we have Silva on the line. Hello, good evening, and welcome to the program.
Yes, good evening once again. I am Silva. I'm calling from Cross River State, not Abakaliki.
Okay, Cross River.
Yes.
Pardon that, mistake. Go ahead, please.
Yes. Let me first of all appreciate the resource persons on the studio there that have done the best to the topic. Yes, from all indication, just as the last caller has stated, I am a farmer also. I need farm inputs like fertilizers and some other things. They are telling us to go back to the farm. Now, those trailer load of fertilizer they say they have distributed, it has all ended in the hands of political farmers without reaching the real farmers in the village. So what are they telling us? The government has not demonstrated a true political will in order to drive agriculture, in order to sustain what we are currently facing in the country. Look at hunger everywhere. They are telling us that we should go to the farm. 10 billion naira to the state. For what? Look at a very wonderful program like the social investment program that President Muhammad Buhari actually introduced. A very wonderful program. Now a lot of changes actually happen in the ministry. The minister from my state has been suspended. Now we are hearing nothing about the program. Look at what that program did to young Nigeria. As I'm stating clearly, I am a beneficiary of that program. I benefited and ran even my MSc from that program. And as I'm speaking, I'm a farmer, not just a farmer, I am also cocoa farming. I need people like fertilizer to fertilize my cocoa. Chemical. I went to get chemicals some days back in order to spread my cocoa. Look at the price. You hear of chemicals that we were buying before about 5,000. Let me not mention name, not to actually go contrary to your role in the studio.
Yeah.
Some chemical we're buying about 4,000 naira, 5,000 naira. They are selling 15,000, 17,000 naira to spray cocoa. Look at fertilizer to even apply on our farm, like the yams, the cassava that we have cultivated. It can't get to us. They say they are sending trailers of fertilizer to the state. Where are the fertilizers? Chemicals is very expensive, so the high side. To be very sincere, the government is not demonstrating any political will. Right. And I can say categorically that I am regretting voting for this government.
Right.
I am regretting. I must apologize to some of my friends on social media that knew that I campaigned for this government. I am regretting voting for this government.
It's still just 1 year so far, Silva.
Has not demonstrated any political will.
Right. Yeah.
Well, thank God.
I was just saying it's just 1 year in.
May God bless you.
Right,
So
okay.
there's no problem. Let me just end here so that other callers will
exactly. Thank you so much, Silva. I appreciate the passion and the contribution to the conversation. You heard what he said. I suppose as the past national coordinator, you're happy he's one of the success stories because he said he did benefit from the NSRP. Is this a classic example of misdiagnosis versus misapplication? Because it does appear that people in power have some kind of understanding of what the problem is, but attempting to solve it seems to have, eluded so many administrations so far.
I think anybody who think that identifying and solving social problems is easy must totally be misreading it. At least the little that I did in the National Social Investment Program, I knew the effort, technical effort, the time and training and meetings that we put into that. This is not a common sense thing. This is a serious business. It's difficult to identify the critical people who require. You know that palliatives cannot go to everybody. You know that when you provide loans, it cannot go to everybody that is required. So you have to be strategic. This country has 774 local government areas. So if you make a statement that it must touch every local government area, you have to have the list of all the local government areas and plan that way.
But to Igboko's comments earlier about politicizing the process itself.
This is, I think the reason why it is seen or it appears to be politicized is that people think this is easy. Get money and share it to people.
With sincerity, it's not that hard.
Well, the thing is, you have to, like Emma said, you have to plan, you have to document, you have to strategize. Otherwise, if you don't look at the whole picture of it, you cannot navigate very well. At the end of the day, you may end up taking the easiest way through, and that is not going to help you. Mark you, we have not yet asked questions of, you remember when, was it 2 to 5 billion naira that were released to the states? We've not asked of what happened now they are going to get 10 billion.
It was supposed to be 5 billion. But some of them said they only got 2.5 billion.
Even if it is half a billion or 1 billion, somebody has to say, well, 1 billion was released and this is what we did and this is how we did. There has to be a learning process. You know what I mean? So this country, we just like money. It's always money, 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 and then you don't even understand even the inputs. Are they free or are they at half price? Are they readily available at the time? This is what makes the whole system very complex. And unless you are committed and you are very prepared, it is going to continue to be seen as a very, very difficult business to deal with.
Right. Osemeka, in 10 seconds, is the Tinubu administration repeating the same mistake others have made in the past about addressing what Juxta just described?
I think they do not understand what the issues are and how to solve it. And I agree with my elder brother in the studio, Umar Bindir. Clearly, they do not understand it. It's not a question of making the mistake where, of others. The others made their mistake, but somewhat they made some level of progress.
Right.
In this 1 year plus, there's not been any progress. It's been retrogression, unfortunately.
Okay. Gentlemen, thank you most kindly for your contributions this evening. Emmanuel Osemeka, public affairs commentator, and Dr. Umar Bindir, former secretary to the Adamawa state government and former national coordinator of the social investment program. And thank you to some of our callers, to our two callers who called in this evening, and to all those who tried unsuccessfully. We do appreciate you most kindly for joining us on the program tonight. We'll be back next week, live and exclusive as always on Trust TV. Until then, my name is Abdullahi Ahmed. From myself and the rest of the team, thank you for your time, and we'll see you soon.